In the village of Eke-Ora, nestled between 7 hills and a river that never dried, even in the cruelest harmattan, there lived a woman whose beauty was spoken of in 3 neighboring kingdoms. Her name was Amara, which meant grace, though the elders who named her could not have known how perfectly they had seen her, for grace was precisely what she carried in every room she entered, in every step she took toward the river, in every refusal she delivered to men who believed her beauty made her available to them. Her skin held the deep, polished brown of iroko wood under rain. Her eyes were large and unhurried, the kind that seemed to study a person's spirit rather than their face. When she walked to the stream with her water pot balanced on her head, the elders said even the birds quieted to watch her pass, and the young men found sudden, urgent reasons to be near the riverbank at that exact hour. Every man in Eke-Ora desired her, the wealthy yam farmer Akanta, the warrior Itamili, who had killed 3 leopards with his bare hands, even Ez, Obioma's own nephew. But Amara's heart had already chosen, long before the others worked up courage to approach her father's compound. She married Eke-Ora, a quiet hunter with steady hands and a steadier heart, a man who did not boast of his catches, but simply laid them at his mother's feet and let his actions speak. For 3 years, their marriage was the kind villagers pointed to when they wanted to describe contentment. Then illness took Eke-Ora in a single rainy season, swift and merciless, and Amara became a widow before her 24th harvest. Osaro, the chief priest of the shrine of Ogugu, had watched Amara since she was a girl plaiting her mother's hair beneath the udala tree. Her marriage to Eke-Ora had wounded something proud and possessive in him, though he had hidden it behind ritual robes and solemn chants. Her widowed, he believed, was the gods finally clearing his path. He came to her compound with gifts wrapped in fine cloth and words wrapped in false gentleness. She refused him. He came again with promises of status, that she would never again carry her own water, that she would sit beside him at every festival as the second most honored woman in Eke-Ora after the queen herself. She refused him again, this time without softness, for grief had taught her that some pursuits did not deserve patience. A third refusal broke whatever restraint remained in Osaro. That night, he slipped a sacred ancestral staff, older than the village itself, said to hold the spirits of the founding fathers, from its resting place in the inner shrine and buried it beneath the floor of Amara's hut while she slept. By morning, he stood before Obioma, the king, wailing that the staff was gone, that an abomination had been committed against the ancestors, that the shrine itself had gone cold with their fury. The search that followed was performed with theater rather than truth. Osaro led the search party himself, straight to the loose earth beneath Amara's sleeping mat. The village did not wait for her tears to be believed. A woman could not be permitted to live with the blood debt of insulting the ancestors hanging over the whole community. The elders feared drought, feared stillbirths, feared the shrine's silence at the next planting season more than they feared injustice. Within 2 days, Amara was banished, cast beyond the boundary stones, into the great forest that the village called Ohia Eke, the forest of fate, a place from which almost no one returned. She walked into the forest carrying nothing but the child growing inside her, conceived in the last warm months of her marriage before Eke-Ora's death. Amara walked for 3 days, eating what fruit she could find, sleeping in the hollows of fallen logs. On the 3rd night, her labor began beneath the largest iroko tree the forest had ever grown, a tree so ancient that its roots rose from the earth like the ribs of a sleeping giant, its canopy so wide it blotted out the moon entirely. She understood, somewhere in her exhausted body, that she would not survive this birth alone, far from any midwife, weakened by days of walking and grief. As the pains came harder, she pressed her palms against the great trunk and spoke not as a woman speaks to wood, but as a woman speaks to whatever power might still be listening to her after everything that had been taken. "Great tree," she whispered, "if there is a spirit in you, if the old gods of this forest still hear the voices of wronged women, I beg you, I will not live to raise her, I feel it. But let no harm ever touch my daughter. Be her mother where I cannot. Be her shield. Let nothing in this world or beyond it harm a single hair on her head." The wind that answered her was not natural wind. It moved only through the iroko's branches, while the rest of the forest stood still. And within that moving canopy, two eyes opened in the bark itself, ancient and gold, and infinitely sad. The goddess of the iroko, who villagers in ages past had called Ogam-hei, though no living soul still spoke her name, had not stirred for 300 years. But the desperate honesty of a dying mother's love was the one thing in all the worlds that could still move her. The child was born as her mother's spirit left her body. Ogam-hei wrapped the forest itself around the infant that night, softened the ground beneath her, warmed the air around her, and kept every predator that came near at a careful, baffled distance, as though some invisible wall surrounded the newborn girl. The goddess named her Zara, the Radiant One, though she spoke the name in the old tongue that only wind and water understood, pressing it into the child's skin like a mark, like a promise, like the first gift a mother gives before anything else is possible. Zara grew up among monkeys and antelope, bathing in forest streams, sleeping in the curled embrace of the iroko's roots. She never knew hunger that lasted, never knew cold that lingered, never understood why fruit always seemed to fall conveniently near her hand, or why the leopards that prowled Ohia Eke gave her wide, respectful berth. Once, when she was 7, a black mamba, the deadliest serpent in that forest, coiled itself silently along a branch above her sleeping place, drawn by the chief priest's old curse that still lingered faintly in her blood, an echo of the ancestral malice that had banished her mother. As its fangs descended toward her neck, the branch beneath it burst into sudden flame, and the snake fell to the earth, ash before it finished hissing. Zara woke only to the smell of smoke and never knew how close death had come. She grew tall and impossibly lovely, her mother's deep, polished beauty combined with something otherworldly that the forest itself seemed to have lent her, a way of moving that made the wind seem to part for her. On her left shoulder blade, she carried a birthmark shaped like an iroko leaf, identical in every vein and curve to the one her mother had carried in the same place. A mark none in the forest could see clearly, since Zara had never once looked upon another human's bare back to compare. By the time she was 18, the wildness in her had begun to feel less like home and more like a question. She started wandering farther from the great tree than she ever had before, drawn, though she did not know why, toward the boundary stones that marked the edge of Ohia Eke. The village of Eke-Ora had grown smaller in 18 years and quieter, as if it had spent 2 decades flinching. Zara stepped across the boundary stones on an ordinary harvest morning, dressed in woven leaves and forest-dyed cloth she had made herself, her dark hair wild and long down her back, and the entire marketplace went still. Whispers moved faster than she could walk. Look at her face, look at her eyes. She looks exactly like an old woman once a friend of Amara fainted at the well. A trader dropped his basket of cowries, and when Zara, confused by the staring, turned to ask directions back toward the forest, her woven wrap shifted on her shoulder and revealed the iroko leaf birthmark for all the marketplace to see. The cry went up before she understood what was happening. The cursed woman's daughter has returned. Hands seized her. Rough, frightened, eager to be rid of whatever doom they imagined she carried, and dragged her toward the king's palace, calling for the chief priest as they went. Osaro had grown old and stooped in 18 years, but his eyes were the same eyes that had buried a staff beneath a sleeping woman's mat. When he was brought before the girl, when he looked into a face that was his old enemy resurrected and made somehow even more radiant, something cracked open in his chest, not guilt, for men like him rarely feel guilt cleanly, but terror, sharp and total. He raised his ancestral staff to point at her, to begin the words that would condemn her as he had condemned her mother. Above the palace courtyard, where there had been no clouds moments before, the sky tore itself open with a single bolt of lightning so bright that witnesses swore afterward they had seen, for half a heartbeat, the shape of a woman's face within it. The lightning struck Osaro where he stood. He did not scream. He simply stopped mid-word and fell and did not rise again. The marketplace scattered in terror. Within hours, the story of the chief priest's death had transformed into a different kind of fear than the one that had driven Amara's banishment. This was not righteous anger at a thief, but pure animal dread of a girl that the gods themselves seemed to guard with violence. As Obioma's successor, the aging King Deo ordered the girl held in a guarded hut at the village edge while the elders debated what to do with her. Twice men were sent under cover of darkness to end her life quietly, to spare the village the spectacle of another public banishment. Both times the men returned before dawn, pale and shaking, refusing to speak of what they had seen in the darkness near her hut, refusing ever to go near her again. When the elders finally decided, out of fear more than mercy, to banish her exactly as they had banished her mother, a wind rose over Eke-Ora unlike any harmattan or storm season the oldest among them could remember. Roofs were torn from huts. The market stalls collapsed into splinters. Goats and chickens fled shrieking into the bush. It lasted exactly as long as the banishment ceremony was attempted, and stopped the instant the elders, terrified, abandoned the proceedings. After that, the village left her alone. No one married her. No one spoke to her beyond necessity. She was given a small hut at the edge of Eke-Ora and food enough to survive, not from generosity, but from the universal, unspoken understanding that whatever protected this girl did not forgive those who tried to harm her. They called her the untouchable one, the cursed queen of nothing, and they were careful always to whisper it only when they thought she could not hear. Zara herself understood little of this. She felt the eyes of the forest still upon her, even here, the way the wind seemed to lean toward her sometimes like a mother checking on a sleeping child. She did not know her own history. She only knew that wherever she went, she walked alone, beautiful and feared in equal measure, waiting, though she could not have said for what. Prince Eke-Ora, only son of King Deo, had spent 6 years in the warrior camps of the northern kingdoms, training in statecraft and sword work, preparing for the day he would return to Eke-Ora to be presented with a bride, and eventually, a throne. He returned a man transformed, broad-shouldered, sharp-eyed, carrying himself with the unhurried confidence of someone who had nothing left to prove. His father arranged the customary procession of eligible women, daughters of chiefs and wealthy families from 3 villages, each presented in her finest cloth and beads, each coached for weeks on the perfect words to win a future king's heart. Eke-Ora greeted each with courtesy and found himself by the 8th day profoundly unmoved. It was by accident that he saw Zara at all. She had come to the stream at the unfashionable hour just past dawn, when she knew the village women would not yet be there to whisper and turn away. Aquadili, restless and unable to sleep, had wandered to the same stream to clear his mind before another day of forced marriage. He did not know her story. He saw only a woman drawing water with the unself-conscious grace of someone who had grown up, answering to no one's expectations, sunlight catching in eyes that held forests in them, a beauty so unguarded it seemed almost dangerous. When she finally noticed him and made to leave, startled, he found himself speaking before he had decided to. "Wait," he said. "Please, I only wish to know your name." When Aquadili returned to the palace and announced that he wished to know more of the woman at the stream with the iroko leaf mark, the room went silent in a way that told him immediately he had asked the wrong question, or perhaps the only right one. His father explained haltingly the entire history: Amara's banishment, the theft she didn't commit, the strange birth in the forest, the lightning that had struck down Osaro, the failed banishment, and the storm that followed. Aquadili listened to all of it without the fear that had governed his father's generation. He had spent 6 years among warriors who judged a person by their character and their conduct, not by the superstitions whispered around a cooking fire. "You are telling me," he said slowly, "that something powerful has protected this woman her entire life. That every person who has tried to harm her has been struck down by forces no mortal can explain." "Yes," King Deo said warily. "Then she is not cursed, father." Aquadili's voice carried the calm certainty of a man who had already made his decision. "She is guarded. There is a difference, and Eke-Ora has been too frightened to see it. He courted her in the open, against every counsel his father's elders offered. He visited her hut not under cover of darkness, but at midday, in full view of the village, and sat with her on the bare earth outside her door, asking her about her life in the forest, listening with genuine wonder as she described a girlhood spent among silent, watchful trees. Slowly, the fear that had calcified around her for months now began in small and grudging ways to thaw, not because the village trusted her, but because they could not argue with a prince who clearly did not care. On the day, Prince Aquadili formally declared his intention to marry Zara before the full council of Eke-Ora. The great iroko tree of Ohia Eke, though it stood 3 days' walk from the village, was seen by hunters returning from the forest to be glowing faintly gold from root to crown, as though lit from within by some patient, satisfied fire. At the wedding itself, held beneath the open sky so the whole village could witness it, an old woman who had served as a junior priestess decades before stood and trembling, confessed what she had long suspected and never dared speak, that she had once seen Osaro near the shrine's inner chamber on the very night the ancestral staff disappeared, far earlier than his alarm had suggested, and had stayed silent out of fear for her own life. It was not proof in the way courts of men demand proof, but combined with the lightning that had struck the old priest, dead the moment he raised his staff against an innocent woman's daughter, combined with 18 years of unexplainable protection, the village of Eke-Ora finally allowed itself to believe what should have been obvious from the start. Amara had never stolen anything. She had been destroyed by a man's wounded pride and a village too afraid to question him. King Deo, moved by the confession and by his son's unwavering certainty, stood before the gathered village and declared that the name of Amara would be restored with full honor, that a shrine would be built in her memory beside the great iroko in the forest, and that her daughter would be crowned not as a tolerated outsider but as Eke-Ora's rightful queen. Zara, who would from that day be known by the name the goddess had given her at birth, became queen of Eke-Ora beside Aquadili, and the village that had once driven her mother into the forest to die became, under her quiet and watchful rule, a place known throughout the region for its fairness toward the powerless and its swift justice against cruelty disguised as righteousness. It was said that on quiet nights, if the wind moved correctly through the palace courtyard, it carried the faint scent of iroko leaves, though the nearest of those great trees stood 3 days away. Zara never spoke of it, but those closest to her noticed she would sometimes pause in the middle of her duties, tilt her head as though listening to something only she could hear, and smile the soft, private smile of a daughter greeting a mother who had never, in 18 years of silence, actually left her side. The great iroko in Ohia Eke still stands, villagers say, older than memory and watchful as ever, no longer guarding a child alone in the wilderness, but resting now, at last, having seen her safely home.